Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gambling Flow, your daily dose of everything gambling. I'm Russell Kane,
And I'm Fiona Blake.
and today we're going
Deep.
deep into a topic that's been plaguing card games since, well, the invention of cards.
Avoiding cheats using marked cards.
Yeah, we'll be looking at how to spot these cheats, what to watch out for, and what you can do to protect yourself and your hard-earned cash.
Because at the end of the day, knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more we understand about how cheating works, the less likely we are to become victims. So, Fiona, where should our listeners be most on the lookout for this kind of thing? Is it mainly in those kind of seedy backroom poker games we see in the movies?
Well, those shady, unregulated games are definitely more prone to cheating, but truth is, marked cards can pop up anywhere, even in a casual game at home or in a casino. You always need to be aware.
So it's not just about avoiding those stereotypical smoky poker dens. We need to have our guard up no matter where we play. Gotcha. So let's say we're in a game and something feels off. What are some of the first signs that someone might be trying to pull a fast one with marked cards?
It's all about observation. First, pay attention to the people you're playing with. Does anyone seem overly focused on their cards? Maybe squeezing them excessively or holding them in unusual ways?
So those seemingly innocent habits could actually be a way to subtly mark the cards. That's a tricky one to catch.
Exactly. It's about spotting those little deviations from normal behavior. Now, a player might just be a bit fidgety, so don't jump to accusations. But if you combine that behavior with other suspicious signs, it's worth paying closer attention.
Makes sense. You're building a case like a poker detective. So let's say we notice a player acting a little strange with their cards. What are some of the actual marking techniques we should be looking for? Are we talking about big obvious marks on the back?
Sometimes it can be that blatant, but most cheaters are more subtle. Think tiny creases, almost invisible bends, or even slight discolorations on the edges of the cards.
Wow, so we're talking about really minute details here. It sounds like you'd need a magnifying glass to spot some of these marks.
You'd be surprised how much you can pick up with careful observation. Focus your attention on the high-value cards like aces and kings. Those are the ones cheaters are most likely to mark because they give the biggest advantage.
Makes sense. They're not going to waste time marking a two of spades. They want to know when those game changers are coming up.
Exactly. And while those marks might be tiny, they can be enough to give a cheater the edge they need.
So we're watching for shady characters, unusual card handling, and trying to spot those tiny imperfections on the cards themselves.
Right.
But what about those stories we hear about invisible ink and special contact lenses? Is that just Hollywood hype, or are those techniques really out there?
Oh, those techniques are absolutely real, and they can be incredibly difficult to detect because they rely on methods that are invisible to the naked eye.
Okay, that sounds seriously high-tech. How does something like invisible ink even work in a card game?
Think of it like a secret code. The cheater uses special ink that can only be seen under certain lighting conditions. They might have a tiny ultraviolet light source hidden somewhere, or even wear special contact lenses that allow them to see the markings.
Wow, that's like something straight out of a spy movie. It sounds almost impossible to catch someone using those techniques.
It's definitely challenging, but there are still ways to protect yourself. One of the most effective is to simply ask for a new deck of cards.
Ah, that classic tactic. Just casually suggest a fresh deck and see how they react.
Exactly. A genuine host who wants a fair game won't hesitate to provide a new deck, but if they get defensive, try to deflect, or make excuses, that's a major red flag.
So even if they come up with some elaborate story about not having another deck, their reaction itself could be a giveaway.
Precisely. It's all about reading between the lines and paying attention to those subtle cues. People often reveal more through their reactions than they realize.
This is all starting to sound like we need to be expert poker players,
Yeah.
A&D expert detectives. But what if we've done all that we've noticed? Suspicious behavior. We've asked for a new deck, and we're still pretty sure something's fishy. What's our next move? Do we confront the suspected cheater?
Confrontation can be risky, especially if you're not 100% certain, and it can create an uncomfortable situation for everyone involved.
So what's the alternative? Just grin and bear it while we watch our chips disappear.
There's a better option: walk away.
Seriously. Just pack up and leave in the middle of the game.
Sometimes that's the smartest play you can make. Remember, there's no shame in prioritizing your safety and your bankroll. You don't have to prove anything to anyone.
You know, you're absolutely right. I'd much rather walk away feeling a little foolish than stay and get fleeced by a cheater.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, better safe than sorry. And sometimes the best way to win is to simply not play.
That's some great advice, Fiona. But I think it's important to acknowledge that learning about all these cheating methods can make anyone a bit paranoid. How do we find that balance between being aware and becoming overly suspicious of every player at the table.
That's a great point, Russell, and it's something we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, listeners, we're going to leave you hanging on that cliffhanger for just a bit. But when we come back, we'll dive deeper into how to assess the overall situation and make informed decisions about your gameplay. So stick around.
We'll also discuss some specific strategies for minimizing your risk of encountering cheating in the first place.
Don't miss it. We'll be back in a flash with more insights and advice right here on Gambling Flow.
See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about that balance, right, between being aware of cheating and becoming overly suspicious.
Yeah, like we don't want our listeners thinking everyone's out to get them right. We just want them to be informed.
Exactly. So one of the keys is to look at the frequency of unusual events. If you see one or two hands that seem a little unlikely, it could just be variance, the natural randomness of the game.
So we shouldn't assume cheating just because someone gets dealt pocket aces 2 hands in a row.
Right, exactly. But if those improbable wins keep happening, and it's always the same player who's benefiting, that's when you need to start paying closer attention.
So it's about patterns then. One lucky streak might just be a fluke, but a consistent pattern of unlikely wins, that raises a red flag.
Precisely. And remember those subtle cues we talked about earlier? A player's reaction to a request for a new deck, for example? If they get flustered or dismissive, that's a tell that something might be off.
So we're watching for patterns of unusual wins,
Okay.
paying attention to those subtle behavioral cues. What else should we consider when we're trying to assess the overall situation?
Well, think about the environment you're playing in. Are you in a regulated poker room with established rules and security measures? Or is it a more informal, private game?
I guess that makes a big difference, doesn't it? A casino has a reputation to uphold. They don't want cheating scandals.
Exactly. Regulated poker rooms have trained staff surveillance technology and procedures in place to deter and detect cheating. While it's not impossible for cheating to occur in these environments, the risk is significantly lower compared to private games.
So sticking to reputable casinos can give us a bit more peace of mind. But what about those of us who enjoy those casual home games with friends? Should we be constantly on edge, scrutinizing every card and every player?
Not at all. In most cases, home games are exactly what they should be. Friendly games among people who trust each other. But even in those settings, it's wise to be aware of the potential for cheating, however unlikely it might seem.
So we're not saying that private games are inherently dangerous, just to approach them with a healthy dose of awareness. Choose your games and your fellow players carefully.
Absolutely. And if something feels off, don't hesitate to speak up or, as we discussed earlier, walk away. Your intuition is a powerful tool and you should trust it.
And remember, listeners, knowing about these cheating methods isn't about turning you into some paranoid poker detective. It's about empowering you with knowledge and making you a more informed player.
Exactly. The more you understand about how cheating works, the better equipped you are to protect yourself and ensure you're playing in a fair and enjoyable environment.
So, Fiona, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the subtle art of marking cards to the psychology of spotting a cheat. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
I think it's important to remember that one of the best ways to avoid getting cheated is to simply be a good player yourself.
That's an interesting perspective. How does being a skilled player help protect against cheating?
Well, think about it. Cheaters often target weaker players. Those who might be easily intimidated or lack a deep understanding of the game.
They're looking for easy marks, the ones who are more likely to make mistakes and fall for those tricky tactics.
Exactly. But if you've honed your skills, if you understand the odds, if you can read your opponents, you become a much less appealing target.
It's like having a built-in cheat detector. You're more likely to spot those inconsistencies in their play. You'll be more confident in calling their bluffs, and you'll be less likely to make those costly errors that cheaters prey upon.
Precisely. So invest in your poker education, listeners. Learn the game inside and out. Practice your skills. And trust your instincts. The more you know, the less likely you are to be taken advantage of.
Well, listeners, we've spent a lot of time in the murky world of marked cards today, haven't we?
We have, and hopefully we've shed some light on how to avoid getting caught out.
We've exposed those sneaky techniques, from subtle little marks to that high-tech stuff like invisible ink, and we've talked about how cheaters actually think, how they target their victims.
And most importantly, we've given our listeners the knowledge they need to protect themselves, right?
Exactly, because let's be honest, it's hard to enjoy the game when you're worried about being cheated.
Absolutely. Poker should be about skill strategy and a little bit of luck. Nobody wants someone trying to tip the scales with dirty tactics.
So let's go over the key takeaways one last time. just to make sure our listeners are armed and ready.
Sounds good. The first thing to remember is knowledge is power. The more you understand about how cheating works, the harder it is for someone to pull the wool over your eyes.
Right, and always be observant. Look for those subtle cues, like weird ways of holding cards or excessive squeezing.
And don't be shy about asking for a new deck. If the host is on the level, they won't mind at all.
Trust your gut. If something feels off, it
Oh.
probably is. And hey, there's absolutely no shame in walking away from a game if you're not comfortable.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
your money and your fun on the line.
Yeah.
You don't owe anyone anything.
We also talked about how becoming a better player can actually help protect you from cheats.
Yeah, think about it. Cheaters target the weaker players, the ones who are more likely to fall for their tricks.
But if you know the game inside and out, if you can read people and spot inconsistencies, you're a much tougher target.
So my advice is invest in your poker education. Learn everything you can, practice your skills, and never underestimate the power of your gut feeling.
Wise words, Fiona. So to wrap up, keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep those cards close to the vest.
And have fun. That's what poker's all about.
Couldn't agree more. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of marked cards. I'm Russell Kane.
And I'm Fiona Blake.
Thanks for tuning in to Gambling Flow. We'll be back tomorrow with another deep dive into the exciting world of gambling. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your poker buddies. See you at the tables.